Well, hello again. Jeremy and Wendy Myers here, discussing adventures in fishing for men. We're discussing Chapter 5, How to Attract Fish. So I wrote this chapter thinking about how churches often try to attract non-Christians to come to their church. So he has this pool that he wants to catch fish in. It's representative of the church and how we often do our evangelism inside the church building. And he figures the best way to do that is to first get the fish into his pool. So he's not having a whole lot of luck with that so far, but he thinks in Chapter 5 he's got it figured out. So he's going to attract fish. And so he's trying to figure this out, and in the beginning of the story, he discovers that he can't think because his neighbor is building a fence. All that racket, the pounding and the sawing and everything else next door. So he thinks that his neighbor is the worst because his neighbor's building a fence. Yep. And if you remember why his neighbor is building a fence, it's because his neighbor's trying to keep the fisherman out of his yard, because in the previous chapter he went over there without asking, tore up his trees and his lawn and his rocks, and so that's why the fence has to go up. And I don't know, I just thought it was sort of funny, Wendy, because honestly, Christians sometimes make the worst neighbors, right?
Oh, my Lord. We have Christian neighbors, or ones that think they're Christians. They were, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Our first year here, this is a story that just came to me.
No.
Maybe I shouldn't share this. Our first year here, Wendy was out doing some planting in our side yard, sort of, which borders our neighbor's yard. And, there was some mud involved, right?
There was some mud. Because I was ripping up all of their weeds that were coming into our yard.
Well, they never weed and do any yard work of any sort.
No,
so
never.
It's just a weed patch over there. And so Wendy was ripping these up. I think you were ripping up their weeds, right?
I was ripping
it
up
was
their
on
weeds.
Their land.
I went over to the yard.
Uh-oh. Sorry about that. We were interrupted by a phone call. But anyway, so it was a story about our neighbor.
Yes, and
Wendy,
the weeds that I was pulling out lovingly for them. It took me about 4 hours to pull out all their weeds.
So that we could plant some flowers. You were going to plant some nice bushes and flowers.
Right.
Anyway, they came...
Not on their property, on our property.
They came over and were very, very upset because Wendy had left some muddy footprints on their driveway.
On their driveway. And this is Oregon. It rains every day.
Yeah, this was during the rainy season.
Yes.
So I think it was probably raining at the time.
Yes, raining at the time.
So,
I was cleaning out, spent 4 hours weeding their yard.
So they demanded what?
They demanded that I come and scrub on my hands and knees on their pavement the 5 footprints I left in their driveway that was getting rained on as we speak. So my kids are watching me literally on my hands and knees while this lady sits in a chair drinking lemonade. The picture was just too ironic and to die for. And it has only gotten worse. They have actually caused the entire neighborhood to want to call the cops on them multiple times. Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, they're very, very good neighbors. But they
Very
also
Christian.
make everybody know how Christian they are. They're always talking about going to church and everything. And so, anyway, those are the neighbors we don't want to be. But that is the kind of neighbor that the fisherman is in the story here. He goes over and tears up his neighbor's yard. And then when his neighbor tries to build a fence to keep him out, he gets upset at the neighbor. And in fact, he even says... what does he say? He says something about...
scaring away all the fish?
Fences making bad neighbors.
Oh, right.
When really, what makes bad neighbors? Bad neighbors make bad neighbors. So look, if you're a Christian and you want people in your neighborhood and your community to know you're a Christian, that's fine. Just make sure that you are the best neighbor they have ever met.
If you have to tell them you're a Christian, you're not doing a good job of being a Christian.
Yeah, go mow their lawn or weed their flower garden or take them a plate of cookies and don't invite them to church.
Don't invite them to church. Please no.
Hand out armloads of candy at Halloween. And
instead of tracts
and pencils and with Bible verses on them. We have many, many stories about this. as you can probably imagine, or as you're hearing in our voices. Anyway, okay, so he's upset about the fence, but he says, "Oh, well, forget it." And he goes back to tackling this idea of how to attract fish into his swimming pool. And what does he do? The first thing he does is he realizes that the reason he's having trouble attracting fish is because he doesn't think like a fish. And the reason he doesn't think like a fish is because he's not a fish. Not a fish. Very logical. This was a super breakthrough for him. What I was thinking, though, when I wrote this, actually, was on page 39, if you're reading the paperback book, up there on the right, he really criticizes fish for being smelly and stinky and slimy.
And depraved.
Yep. And he thanks God that he himself is not a fish. And I was thinking of Luke 18, sort of 11 and 12 in there, where we have the tax collector and the Pharisee, and they're both gone to the temple. And the tax collector says, "God, thank you for not making me a sinner like this tax collector." And the tax collector, though, says, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." Yeah. And Jesus says, "Which one went home righteous this day?" And obviously the tax collector, not the Pharisee. That's what I was thinking here. You know, he wants to catch fish. He wants fish to come, but he hates fish. And again, when it comes to evangelism, you can't have that attitude.
So often the attitude. Or not even that they hate them, but that they're so much lower. These poor people that are so low. When we went to Mexico, I remember that was the attitude of some of the people, that these poor people had nothing. And we great Americans were coming to save them with a VBS. And I'm thinking, I got there, and to be honest, these people were happier than anybody I knew in America. They had each other. They had family. They had community. They had simplicity. And here we are thinking we're doing them a favor by putting up this big building that they're now going to have to take care of. One more big problem in a sense, because we all know that churches take a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of work. And when they didn't have that, they did fine. They sang their songs. They got together. They were just fine. And yeah, we can't think that the people we're trying to talk to or minister to are lower. And I hate that word even, to minister to, because it puts you as a minister to them. And truly, to evangelize to somebody should be we're on the same level and we are friends and loving them in a friendly way. And if you can't see yourself as similar to the people that you're going out to reach, then you have no business going out to reach them. And
we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We have problems too. And if we don't see that, we're just as stinky as them.
Yeah. Oh, many times worse.
Maybe more. It's funny you bring up that Mexico trip. I don't want to prolong the story too much, but remember the missionary couple that was down there? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Miserable. They
yeah.
hated
they were
each
awful.
other.
They hate
were
each other.
Always bad-mouthing each other and
married for like 30, 40 years.
Other.
Yeah. Hated the ministry.
Hated the ministry.
They were there. They'd come up and say about all they're doing, but how much they hated it and how much they were sacrificing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say.
They made it very obvious to the people that were there, too.
Yes.
Like, oh, we're here because God wants us to be, but we hate it.
We hate it. But God called us, so we're being faithful.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, stop being faithful.
Yeah, go home. Anyway. Okay, so what he does is he decides, he knows that fish like worms, flies, and grasshoppers, and so he already has some in his pool because he tore up his neighbor's lawn, and the worms came with it. And then because of all of the fish that were rotting in his pool, the ones he bought from the
fish store.
The fish store, right? They're all rotting, so now there's flies. He doesn't have any grasshoppers yet. He's going to work on that. But he figures that, so now he has the worms and the flies. That's all he needs to attract the fish. So all he needs to do now is tell the fish, hey, everything you need is in my pool. And again, it's advertising. And again, it reminds me of the way we Christians, churches in general, try to advertise to the surrounding community. Oh, you like good music? We have the best music here. Oh, you need stuff for your children? We got the best stuff here for our children. usually
PBS.
it's not the best.
No, it's not.
But usually what they can get down at the local park or at the local bar, a lot of those are even better than what the church offers.
Right. But the signs, Jeremy said, when he was writing this, also made him think of, we have a church down the street that we just
the signs that he makes.
Yeah.
Right. He makes up signs to attract the fish. Yeah, okay. So
and
church
so
signs.
It makes Jeremy think of the sign that I came home one day and said, it just made me laugh. We had been passing the sign for years and just had never hit us. And then I just came home, past it one time, and I'm just like, oh my word, they have no idea what their sign says. Their sign is faith-free church. And I was like, it's like sugar-free gum. That means it has no sugar. So this church has no faith. So we die laughing. And we went there. And we went there for a Christmas Eve service. And it was the most ironic and it was a very eye-opening experience that day because we had just served packing boxes for the needy in our community, and then taking those boxes to the homes and meeting the people of these homes that needed these Christmas meals or gifts for their children. And the girls and Jeremy and I had spent probably 4 or 5 hours doing that, and it was so much fun. And it became a Christmas tradition that we do every year now because it's just amazing to get your kids out there and let them see how blessed they are and to see the people that they need to reach out to. And then we go to this Christmas Eve service where, let's just say it was completely the opposite. And
it was a complete show.
It was a complete show.
Like, look at me, how great my voice is.
Yeah, the Christmas songs they were singing were not the Christmas songs anyone knows. They had made them up so they could sing on stage for half an hour. And anyways, it got worse from there, but we were just like, faith-free.
Faith-free. Sugar-free is no sugar. Faith-free is no faith. I actually wrote a blog post about that experience of ours with two Christmas Eve services. So I'll put a link if you take the online course, the Fishing for Men online course at redeeminggod.com. I'll put a link to it. I think if you just search Google for it, you can probably find it too. I think it was called A Tale of Two Christmas Eve Services.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Something like that, probably on redeeminggod.com. I'll put a link though in the notes. But and also there's a link in there about funny church signs. Often churches put out these signs. They don't realize what they're saying. But the people in the community do.
Yep.
And churches often get mocked and ridiculed because of their silly, ignorant, foolish church signs. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I was thinking here.
Take the sign down.
Yeah, take the sign down. He puts up signs to try to attract fish into his pool. And he thinks that once he gets fish, they're going to love it so much because of the worms and the flies.
Right.
That they will invite all of their fish friends.
Yeah, and that's something else I was thinking that was very interesting is because I think so many times we as Christians, we get so used to what church is that we get so used to putting our mask on at church that we think we're happy there. When in reality, we're so far from the truth that it's funny that he thinks that they're going to be happy once they get there, when in reality, they're happy outside of the church. And we just need to remember that inviting people into church, although you think it might save their lives and give them, eternal life everlasting, doesn't mean they're happier. Because a lot of times the church just makes people miserable. It's a place of gossip. It's a place of always having to one-up somebody. It's a place of
guilt and control.
And it's not
shame and So attending church doesn't always make better people out of people.
No.
So in fact, it's interesting to sort of as we get to the end of the chapter here. His neighbor comes back over and complains about the stench. Remember how just a few minutes ago we talked about how he thought fish stunk. And now his neighbor comes over, and who is really making the stink in the neighborhood? It's him, because he has all these rotting fish stinking up his around his backyard, and the stench is going over into his neighbor's yard. And again, it just sort of made me think about how churches sometimes, we think we're being a blessing to the community.
Yeah.
We're doing all these things for the community. But really, sometimes we're more of a stench in the community because we have traffic problems or noise issues, or we're not taking care of our property sometimes. Maybe they are weed patches, or there's just a wide variety of things. Maybe it's because our community is poor and we have one of the prime real estate spots in town, and because we're a nonprofit organization,
don't pay taxes.
We're not paying property taxes, which then causes problems with the budget in the community. And I mean, it's just little things like that that cause us to be an annoyance in the community rather than a blessing, rather than being an aroma. I think Scripture talks about we should be a pleasing aroma to our neighborhood.
Yeah, just the traffic is a big one. I remember when we were in school, one of the biggest things they were saying was that these community churches were trying to pop up in communities, but that the communities were actually trying to stop it because it meant tons of traffic Wednesday and Sunday, and they couldn't even get out of their driveways. And I mean, even our neighbor, on Wednesdays, they have 5 to 7 cars, and there's been times when it's been hard to manipulate our car out of our driveway because they park right in front of our cars. It's like, really?
Yeah, I've come so close to backing into one of their cars because they block us in on our driveway. They
block us in.
Yeah, coming over for their Bible study.
It's crazy.
So,
but
be very, very careful how your neighbors and the people in your community think about you. We want to be a pleasing aroma, not a stench in our community. Yeah. So anyway, the neighbor, just at the end here, well, the fisherman criticizes the neighbor because he says, I've never seen you do anything remotely associated with fishing.
Right.
But really, the fisherman's not fishing himself yet either. He hasn't done anything. He's got a boat and fishing poles, but anyway.
And that's the thing I was thinking of too, is that true evangelism, that it doesn't look like what the church tells you it looks like. So this neighbor is actually, which you'll find out when you read the book, he's actually an expert fisherman. Just like many Christians are expert at evangelism, but they don't attend church. They don't wear the shirts or wear the jewelry or put the fish on their bumper sticker. You know, they just go out and love people and tell people about Jesus because the people ask. They have a relationship, and that's what true evangelism is and is supposed to be. It's not what the church tells you it looks like.
Best evangelist I've ever met is a man named Sam Rivera. I dedicated the book to him.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's in there somewhere. There it is. To Sam Rivera, a truly great fisherman. Yeah. But you wouldn't think that if you were to watch him day in and day out that what he's doing is evangelism, because he doesn't spread tracts, he doesn't go door to door, he doesn't tell people about Jesus, but he has more of an impact for the gospel in his community than any person I've ever met before in my life. And he's written some guest posts for my blog as well on getting to know your neighbor and loving people in your community. So you can go to redeeminggod.com, and there's a whole list of some of the things that he has written there, which will help you do the same thing. And just remember, like Wendy said, though, evangelism, true evangelism, doesn't look like what we think of as evangelism.
Yeah, the church's evangelism is manipulation. Yeah.
What does true evangelism look like?
Love.
Love.
They will know us by our love.
Yep. Loving people. So, anyway. Okay, that was chapter 5. Next chapter, we get into the fishing mission.
Oh, my.
Should be fun. All right, we'll see you then. Bye.